Up next, we have Barb Gentili Green. She is our new Director of Student Services and Accessibility as of August of 2022. With her, she brings 38 years of education administration in student support services, including in special education and literacy. She previously served as the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Centerburg Local Schools and was a consultant for about 7 years for the North Central Education Service Center in Mansfield, where she designed and delivered professional development for school districts. She began her education career as an occupational therapist and later as an intervention specialist, and went on to serve the Morrow County Board of Developmental Disabilities and later the Mount Gilead Exempted Village Schools as Director of Education, Curriculum, and Preschool from 2006 to 2013. So I'm going to hand it over to Barb.
All that means is I'm old. So I'm really happy to be here tonight. I wish that I could meet each one of you individually. And so one of the things I do want to offer is, if you wouldn't mind, I mean, I've tried to write your names down, but I might miss people as they come in. If you get a chance to put your name in the chat, and then if you would want me to reach out to you individually, or if you want me to call you or email you, or just put your contact info in there. I just want to be available and try to get to meet as many people as I can. So thank you for having me. I'm going to, I put together a little PowerPoint because that's the way it keeps me on track. So I will share my screen here and we'll kind of run through that. Can you see my screen that says SEPTO meeting? Okay. All right. Thanks, Allie. I saw you shaking your head. So what I think the goals are tonight is I do want to get to know you a little bit. So whatever information you want to share with me, I'd love it. I'll share about myself and focus so far the recommendations and the work that I've been doing since August 2nd. And to establish ways to communicate in the future. So I hope that matches the goals that SEPTO thought when they had me. So they wanted me to share a little bit about myself. So I had put this slide together and shared it with the staff at Bexley, and I had a little voiceover, but I'll just kind of talk through it to say this is in part my family. So my husband is Chip. We've been married for over 36 years and we have 3 children. Orion is our oldest and he lives in Canada. George, you're heading to Canada. So it made me think of him right away. And he's married to Laura, and they have our first grandchild, Brianna. And then McKinley on the left here is my son who lives in Washington, D.C. and teaches at a university there. And then our youngest is Aurora. She is in Salt Lake City, and she's a social worker that works with teens. And we have dogs. These are our 2 dogs. I was telling Rachel when I first got on, I hope they're behaving downstairs. I gave them some treats, so hopefully they're behaving. And some of my interests are flower gardening. I love sunflowers. I think they're just happy. And I love the West. So this one with the red rocks, it reminds me of my kids because they've lived out West for quite a while. And I just love going out there and seeing those beautiful sights. I have a YouTube channel with my friend Ron Rogers from Ocala, and it's just called 10 Minutes with Barb and Ron. It's really nothing fancy about it, except we just talk about everything education and universal design for learning and how it can support all learners. And I'll get into a little bit more about my beliefs about education, but this poster is one that has guided me for a long time. So universal design for learning has taught us that it is the environment, not the students, that need to change. And so that's sort of my belief system. If we really look at the environment and try to figure out what barriers there might be in that environment for kids, and then we intentionally work to take away those barriers, then more and more and more kids will be successful. And so that's sort of a overarching belief. And then I had to have another picture of Brianna. We're going to be grandparents again. Aurora is due October 1st. So hopefully we'll have another grandchild to go visit here soon. So So that's a little bit about me personally. And then I have a few slides about what I believe, and I think some of the history that Rachel shared with you, these have evolved over time. So, you know, I'll just kind of go through them, and hopefully it'll give you a picture into how I approach how we provide our services. And so this one is really believing that all of us, variability exists within all of us. And it's not, it's not just students with disabilities. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. And so while we have to recognize that while some of folks, so on this side, it's talking, this student has difficulty with attention, but is doing really well in memory, has difficulty in vocabulary, but is really strong in reasoning. And this student over here has a jagged profile. It's just trying to show that a label doesn't define the strengths and the areas of need that a person has. So I try to really help people see that we have to look at the child as a whole, and we have to find out what are those things that they're doing really well in that we can leverage and use in order to support the things that they might struggle with. And this is all children. And I think this is one way that we can help in our classrooms for sort of that acceptance and realization that everybody has things that they need sometimes. And just because I'm a student with a disability doesn't mean that I'm any different than anybody else, because the student sitting next to me might need help in something else tomorrow. So I think tries to help everybody see that we all need help sometimes, create that community. So that's variability. And then you've probably seen this slide before. And I cannot see anybody. So if at any time you can't see something, or somebody just speak up and tell me. So if you want me to stop and answer a question, I will. So this is another thing that I believe is that we have to remove barriers. And so this slide, you see a young man in a wheelchair on the left. You see a custodian shoveling snow, and you see a lot of other kids. And the student in the wheelchair says, "Could you shovel the ramp, please?" And the custodian says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you." And the student says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we all can get in." And so to me, this is just a nice visual to show that sometimes the things that we think are needed for certain kids are really helpful for all kids. And if we just design that way from the get-go, then we have been more inclusive. So that's what I believe about removing barriers. Another really strong belief I have is that all students belong to all adults in the school system, and that we all have a role to play. We all have skills and ideas and knowledge that we bring to the table. And when, in this regard, the educational team really collaborates, then we get the full benefit and that puzzle is complete. And of course, we need the family input within that. But this is really setting a tone about it is not just the responsibility of our special education team to meet the needs of our students, it's everybody's responsibility. So what's the general educator's role? What's the therapist's role, the intervention specialist? So I really believe that all students belong to all adults in the school. And then my last one is about building capacity. I truly, truly believe that when we help our staff learn new ways to teach and to assess and to get kids engaged in school, then kids will do better. And we really have to honor that. I mean, I made mistakes. I look back and I go, man, I wish when I had my first class of students, I would have known better to not do XYZ. There's many things I could fill in the blank there. So I think we have to help staff understand this quote from Maya Angelou is that do the best you can until you know better. then when you know better, do better. So I believe that if we build the capacity, it really helps all of our children. So those are some of my beliefs. And so what I've been trying to do over the past month and a week or so, 5 weeks or so, I've been trying to meet families and getting to know students. I've been trying to attend some different meetings with families and their students to just try to get to know everybody. I honor, and Rachel is so eloquent when she talks about this, is that I realized that Sam McMaster's had a long history with Bexley, and she knows many of your children very well. And that must feel a little uncomfortable to have somebody new come in that doesn't know your history. And so I recognize that, and I want to get to know people so that I can, help with some of the decisions that your team is making on behalf of your child. So I'm trying to get out there and meet people. That's one of the things I wanted to say, and I'll put it in the chat. I'm going to offer up some different opportunities. Of course, I wrote a sticky note down with the date. September 21st is the first one, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the high school library. I'm just going to be there. We'll have some snacks so that if anybody wants to just come and chat and get to know each other a little bit better, I would welcome that. So I'll be putting that out with some other dates that I'll do during different times of the day. So the other thing I've been trying to do is just learn the current Bexley way, like how are things done here? What has been the past process and procedure, and identifying what are the things that are really working well. And then one of the things I heard in the interview process is that there's a desire to just continue to build the consistency within the district so that there's some procedures and policies that are consistent regardless of what building you're in. So, oops, I went too far. And then honestly, I can't see what the last one is because this bar is covering it up. So, determining professional development needs. Sam had left some professional development goals that were started that we're continuing, but then we're also just trying to figure out what are the next things that we need to do. So, oh, goodness, so I'm locked. There we go. So the next steps, what we're trying to do is the plan is to develop a 1-year action plan based on the work group recommendations. And I'll be going into those here in a little bit. And then know that we are, as a district, working on strategic planning, and we will integrate in special education goals and action steps within that strategic plan, so that it's not a separate plan. It's integrated into the work of the district. And I will always be keeping my eye on how are we ensuring that we're looking out for and addressing the needs of our students with disabilities within that strategic plan. And we anticipate that that'll be a 3 to 5 year plan. And there will be more information coming out on that. There will be some board action related to some consulting firm that is going to help us with that. So stay tuned for that. So, okay, I think what I'm going to do is jump over to a video that actually Valerie Hollis, and Valerie, if I'm saying your name wrong, I really apologize. But I'm going to share a video
That's
that
correct.
Valerie. Okay.
Yeah, I have to mute myself. I'm gonna have to hide myself now because I hate watching myself.
Oh, thank you for doing this. I think Valerie did a nice job here kind of explaining. So first of all, do you see Valerie on the screen? Does everybody see Valerie's video?
Yes.
Yeah.
I see
Thank
Valerie.
you. Thank you. Okay. So Valerie does a nice job kind of summarizing how this worked.
Hi, my name is Valerie Hellis, and I am a parent of a first grader at Cassingham Elementary who is autistic and has an IEP, which is an individual individualized educational program. And I was part of the special education work group that occurred in the spring of 2022. The work group was comprised of parents, administrative individuals, gen ed teachers, related services, and school board members with an intervention specialist with representation from all of Bexley schools from pre-K to the 12th grade. I became involved with the work group by responding to an email asking for volunteer participation, and then was selected to be part of the group. The work group met on Zoom several times, and participants were broken into different small groups every session. The goal of the sessions were to discuss open-ended questions around the topics of Bexley's instructional strength and areas of growth, student experience, the strengths there and areas of growth for the district, as well as family experience, strengths, and areas of growth for the district. As a result of the discussion and dialogue during the work group sessions, it became apparent that Bexley needs a peer mentoring program. In addition, ongoing training for gen ed teachers, intervention specialists, and related services, and the administration, as well as better forms of communication about what is happening in Bexley special educational programming. It is my hope that there is a commitment across the district to address these needs to help all students in Bexley to shine.
Let's hear it for Valerie. Thank you, Valerie, for for sharing that. I really appreciate that because I've been trying to piece together how the process worked. And so I like hearing firsthand from somebody who was involved in it. I think that's more valuable than hearing my interpretation of what I think happened. But I'll go ahead and keep sharing then with the PowerPoint. Let me just X out of a couple things here. Okay. So the purpose of the work group, and can everybody see the slides again?
Yeah.
Thank you. Was to identify the strengths and the needs of the special education department based on the family and staff input, to prioritize some focus areas for that immediate plan development. That's what we're talking about for like this year coming up. And then to continue to look at the work that is being done in other parts of the district and how the work of the special education can be embedded within that. So for example, what is happening within the work around equity, what is happening in the work and teaching and learning departments, and then in our HR department, and try to show that there is that connection to special education. So this is how I understand how it went. That, like Valerie said, it was a combination of staff and families. And when I looked at the email ring for who Sam, sent out the report and all the invitations, it looked to me like there were 39 members, 15 of which were family members in the community, and the rest staff, administration, teachers, a mix of staff. There were 6 work sessions. There was an open session for families that was attended by 4 parents. There was a survey that went out to all families of students with disabilities, and the 22 responses were received back. And then they summarized and categorized the feedback into these areas. And Valerie did touch on some of these. So communication, service models and staffing, professional development, parent support and training, and then equity and inclusion. So those were like the big rocks that they tried to fit the feedback into. And one of the things that they did with all the feedback, whether it was people who attended meetings, comments that were in the surveys, or people who came to the open night, they tried to take all of that information, and it's reflected in a variety of ways, but they tried to address each one of those comments through one of these ways. So first of all, the strengths, there was many pages of strengths. And so this is kind of a summary of how I think it fell into these categories, is that this one of our biggest strengths is the staff, the intervention specialists that are here, the therapists that are here, and Rachel as parent mentor. That came out in several comments and several questions. The other one is resources, that the district is willing to invest in resources that help our students. So AT is assistive technology, the mental health services that are available, and the therapy services like OT, physical therapy, speech therapy, that kind of thing. And then also as a strength was the district's willingness to look at the areas of concerns and find resources. So those are big rock categories of strengths of the district. What they did then from the areas of kind of need was prioritize into 4 focus areas. And this is what we would be developing this year's plan on. And then this would also be used as we go on into the strategic planning process. Valerie mentioned the peer mentoring program. And what that is about, how do we, Rachel is so much more eloquent about this program. I'm learning about it, is how we have kids working together and collaborating and developing these really authentic friendships and support systems, because we know sometimes kids will do things for other kids that they won't do for the adults. So it's not only in the learning way, but in the social way and the friendship way, in order to really develop this community that is supportive and understanding of everyone. So that was a big rock, one of the big 4 focus areas. Another one, like Valerie had mentioned, was professional development, ongoing training for administrators, for our intervention specialists and related service staff, and for general education teachers. The next one is the website. And we are trying to work on the website every day. In fact, somebody brought to my attention that my name is not on certain pages, and boy, Carol got right on that and updated the website. She found about 4 places where it still had Sam's name. So that's one quick and easy update, but we're trying to, in general, make that website more accessible and have more information that's easy to find related to students with disabilities. And then the other focus area was making the extracurricular activities more accessible to our students with disabilities. I feel like I'm just yammering on, but we will take a minute for some questions here in a minute.
You're doing great.
I'm enthralled.
You're all so kind. All I'm looking at is my slide and I can't see any faces. So I don't know if people are like sticking their tongue out at me or if they're smiling. So thank you for that verbal feedback. So here are some connections that the work group saw to other initiatives that were going on in the district. That special education will, of course, be very important to keep on the table. So our multi-tiered systems of support, and the district's been doing some work on this already. This past month, I've been involved in a couple of meetings about that. So how do we support all learners? And what does that mean for students with disabilities? The dyslexia law, which, as you know, has been passed, but parts of it have been delayed for another year, but we're already working on parts of that, which include how we assess students to make sure that there's meeting those reading benchmarks as they should be. And then preschool, we already have a preschool, but how can we integrate and connect preschool to school age identification in an early way through preschool special education, mental health support, which Sam had already gotten more in place. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Amber Nichols, is on the call tonight. And that is, Amber is a new staff member that provides mental health support at our high school. That was something that Sam got started before she left, with the addition of a classroom that has an intervention specialist that can support students as they need extra help. And then also with this mental health piece that Amber is able to provide. And then CPI, Crisis Prevention Institute. We now have 2 trainers that are staff members who are can train on CPI, which is an amazing thing. I was so impressed when I got here and heard that, because it allows us a lot of flexibility. We are training staff. In fact, on September 16th, we'll finish the training for core teams in the elementary, middle, and high school. And all of our staff have received what we call the Tier 1 CPI, which is sort of those techniques that can prevent escalation of dysregulation and behavioral concerns. All staff have received that. And then core team members are being trained in the physical support mechanisms of CPI. So having those 2 people, Michelle Jones and Brooke Smith, are our trainers. And it's going to allow us to be more responsive as we get new staff. We don't have to send them somewhere else to be trained. Our people can train them right in-house. So that's something else that Sam got in place before she left. So they also then took some of the feedback. So if I can just recap, they took the feedback, they put it into the 4 priority areas, or they put it into this connects to another district initiative, or they put it into a quick wins category. And this is just a snapshot of the quick wins. And you are going to have access to the document. So you will also have this to refer to later. But in general, these are the big rocks of the quick wins. How we can work on our communication. So one of the things we're working on, actually, Rachel and I just had a meeting this week about our newsletter, the special education newsletter, but how might we integrate it more into the district communication, and so that it's not separate, but it's integrated, but it still meets the needs of the families who have children with disabilities in the district. The other recommendation was having the intervention specialist reach out to families before or right at the beginning of the school year. And I hope that happened. I got a lot of feedback from ISs that they were doing that. I saw some of the ways that they did that. And I hope that your intervention specialist reached out to you. Another quick win is updating the service delivery models within our special education handbook. So looking at what are all the ways we provide service, and is it accurate in the special education handbook? The other quick win is to look at progress monitoring, how we collect data to see if kids are improving on their IEP, and then how do we communicate that effectively to families through the progress reports. So for example, one of the things I recently sent out is our goal is to have the progress report go out at the same time as the report card. The law says that it has to happen at the same frequency as the report card, but to me, it just made sense that it goes in the same envelope. It gives you a full picture of where your child is. And that's, I think, a slight change for the district. But again, Sam had recorded some training on progress monitoring that will be rolling out to staff this year. Orton Gillingham training, we have quite a few people who have gone through additional training this summer. And then we have others who are doing their practicum, which is a lot of hours of working directly with students under the eyes of a trained Orton Gillingham provider. And so as they do more and more of these things, they get a higher level of certification in Orton Gillingham, which is, of course, as you all know, probably a reading approach, a multisensory reading approach. And then the other quick win is paraprofessional training. And we know that we need to work on this. We were just talking about how we are planning for our PD days and how we need to develop more for our aides, our paraprofessionals. So those were some examples of the quick wins. So, well, I'll go ahead and do this, and then I'm going to take the slides down for a minute. I already gave you the updates on the CPI training that's happened. District rep updates is something that I'm giving to our building principals. So my ears and my eyes have been wide open since I've been here, and I'm just looking and listening for themes of either things that might be confusing regarding the special education process, or things that might be different from one building to the next. And remember, I'm trying to develop a system that has some consistency. And so as I hear those things, I'm just putting them into a quick little newsletter to our principals and assistant principals, special ed coordinator, like, here's some things that we can all be consistent about. So that's something new that I've started. We have our leadership team processes with Casey. I think I saw Casey Cosgray, our new chief academic officer, join our meeting tonight. She is new. I am new. Shirley Hamilton with Curriculum and Gifted is new. And as a leadership team, the whole team is working together to develop processes that have our district moving forward in lockstep, everybody focused on goals together. And so that's been a really exciting, that was one of the things that drew me to this district, is this opportunity with this new leadership team to move forward. So that has been going on since day one. Before day one, many of us were doing Zoom meetings. We've been working on the preschool process and just making sure it's really super clear about how we take referrals for students and how we, work through that process. We have contracted with Whitehall to use their adaptive physical education specialist to provide some services to our elementary students. We have a teacher who is an APE teacher at the middle school, high school, and so she serves those students, but we contracted to get the APE services, which have been difficult to find in the past. So those are in place. I mentioned the high school class that has those mental health services engaged. And then AIDS. We have been working very, very hard to get the word out that we need AIDS. And it has been a team approach, but so many different ideas about where we might advertise. And Melissa Klosterman Lando has been sending us resumes and applications almost every day now. We're getting more. So we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to fill all those aid positions here in the near future. It's a long process that we go through to make sure that the aides have the skills, or at least the capacity to learn the skills that we need, and that their references support that they are good people to work at Bexley. So we are getting close to filling all of the positions that have been open. So that's a good thing that has happened. So I am going to throw this link in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to just throw this link in the chat so that you have it. And that will give you the report that Sam provided to Dr. Fine with those big focus areas and some recommendations for next steps. And so I wanted you all to have that. And I want to just take a little minute then and ask you if you would like to reflect, ask questions about, if there's something I need to clarify, this is the time. And we'll probably have to keep this one general, but if you have your very specific student questions, please put it in the chat if you want me to reach out to you. I definitely will do that. But from a general perspective, what questions are you left with about what you just heard? And if you feel more comfortable throwing it in the chat, I am also okay with that.
So Barbara, one question I have, well, first of all, I can't help but comment. Thank you for putting the link in the chat and being so forthcoming with information. I feel like that's That's just really positive to see that forthrightness in the communication with the community. So thank you for that. So the question, I hear it come up a lot, and perhaps there's just an obvious answer. I don't do education for a living, but this professional development thing, it just comes up over and over, and you alluded to it a lot. But I mean, that as an outsider, that seems very broad. So profession to what end, for what purpose, to achieve what goal?
Great. That's an excellent question. So what we know is that when teachers go through their training program, they get a certain amount of information. And then some have been out in the field for a long time. Some maybe just didn't get a lot of courses in how to support learners who learn differently. And so I think there's some learning specific to our special education staff, especially that progress monitoring piece is our focus, and also assistive technology assessments and how we go through that process to determine if students need some more assistive technology. So how are we monitoring progress? How are we communicating that? And then assistive technology. Those were the two big rock areas for professional development for our special education staff. For administration, I think it's more just ongoing, keeping up with the special education requirements and policies and making sure that we are following the law when we are sitting in as a district rep in those meetings. We're following the law if there are, behavioral discipline situations that arise for students with disabilities. There are very specific laws about that. So it's more about some of those legal things, but then also how does the school, under the leadership of the principal, kind of design their schedule so that it's equitable, that kids get the services they need as well as the classes that they need, those kind of like systems kind of things. And then for general educators, it really is about how can we meet the needs of all of the students who are sitting in our classroom, some who may have no difficulty learning my content and others who may need a lot of support learning my content. How can I design my instruction to meet the needs of both of those groups of students? And I think Allie has said it, to me a couple of different times, is that, our students are the students. It's not just our special education staff who are responsible for providing the supports that our students with disabilities need. So how do we help our general educators, do their part, so to speak, during that instruction so that they're not creating any barriers for the students? Does that help a little, George? Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So what other things struck you, or what other questions? Awesome. I see a note in here. No questions. Just appreciate the information. I'm happy to share it. So you guys got a little preview. We're also going to be getting this information out through district mechanisms, newsletter, etc. So we're creating that, but I wanted to get it out to you guys first. So and you may not feel ready to talk about this right now, but if there are things that you think, wow, was this considered, or did the group think about this, and you just have questions about that, maybe after you process tonight, I have a slide with my contact info on it. Just reach back out to me and ask those questions, and if I don't know, I will find out what they are. So okay, so I have a question here in the chat. I would like to understand roles and responsibilities of those involved with special education in Bexley. So I might need a little more information to answer that. Was there a certain role? or
Yeah, just in general, I think it's a little confusing to understand kind of I know the org structure is a little different in an educational setting potentially than it is in a business setting, but it's confusing to know who reports to whom um and who's responsible for what activities. So the difference between what a scope of practice is for an aide versus a scope of practice for an intervention specialist versus a scope of practice for, the school psychologist versus the school counselor versus, there's just a lot of resources that are out there. I don't really understand when one is appropriate versus another. And I could use some more clarity around that.
Okay. Oh, that's an excellent question. That's perfect.
Be concise, Barb.
Okay. No pressure, George.
Just
No
a
pressure.
small question, but and I see a lot of other nods too. Like I think this is a really it's like if I work in healthcare, right? I totally get what all the colors of the scrubs are. I understand it. It's a language I speak. It's an environment I live in, right? Or get. But if you don't work in like education and special education, like it's all super confusing. So, where
Good.
somebody else might ask a transportation guy for, like a water, which is inappropriate, right? You know what I mean? Like they're not going to do that for you. Like I may not understand what an IS is supposed to be doing versus an aide. So I just need to know.
Great. I love that analogy. That made it perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. It took me a long time to realize that people actually were wearing different scrubs for a reason in the hospital. I thought it was just a choice. Like I like purple, so I'm going to wear purple. So yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. So
Nope. There's a code. There's a secret code, right? And it's not secret, but it's just if you know, you know. So
Right.
I would like to know.
Great. Okay, so let me see so I think of the intervention specialist as the teacher who is addressing the very specific unique needs that are in the child's IEP. So their role is to address those goals that were identified in the evaluation team report that were unique, that needed some additional service. And so it is in addition to the general education instruction. Okay, so the intervention specialist is a teacher. They are licensed teachers with this specialty in addressing and figuring out different ways maybe to address goals, how to, figure out best ways for a student might learn, helping the general education teacher with some ideas for how to support them in the classroom. So they're not only a direct provider, but they're also a support for the general education teacher and the rest of the team. In Bexley, the intervention specialist is basically the case manager, is actually, the term that we use. So they are responsible for pulling the team together when it's time for an IEP meeting. They communicate with the family about potential dates. They get all the information out to the team. So they kind of wrap around that child and provide those, non-instructional supports as well. So then if we think about related service, that's a term in special education, and that includes school psychologists. It includes occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, behavior support personnel, adaptive physical educators, nurses. Those are all of those other services that round out and meet very specific goals that a child has. And sometimes those are directly working with the child, and sometimes they are consulting with the team. If a child doesn't have a significant need, but the team still needs some ideas from that specialist, it's more as like a consultant. So they are usually added as a service on the IEP. The mental health services would be considered a related service. And sometimes you'll see those as the provider on some of the social, emotional, or self-regulation goals. Okay, so they're also providers, but they also can provide support to the rest of the team. You kind of get the flood, like we're all doing both. Some direct support the team, Okay. The psychologists generally are the team leaders when there's an evaluation the very first time there's an evaluation to determine if a child has a disability, and then for the 3-year reevaluations that are required by law. So they kind of take the lead on that and pulling all of that information together and summarizing all that information together from all the people that work with the child. Then there has to be a district representative, and that is different every district you go to. That is a person in the district who has been given the responsibility that can speak on behalf of the district and expend funds. Because basically on an IEP meeting, you are saying, yes, we will provide these services and supports, and there's usually money attached to that. So the district representative in Bexley are administrators. They are the principals, the assistant principals. We have a special education coordinator, myself. So we, Melissa Klosterman Lando, actually, because she has background in special education, she has been helping us sometimes sitting in as the district rep if one of those other people are not available. So that person is there to like make sure that the district is following the procedures and the laws when they develop that IEP or that evaluation. They also have the responsibility, if there's disagreement in the team, the district rep makes the decision. So that is the role that they play. I have always been accustomed to being in on a lot of IEP meetings, but this job is a little bit different. And so I am not sitting in on all the IEP meetings, but I am asking people to invite me to IEP meetings so that I can meet families, that I can kind of see how things are going and what needs families have, and just get that firsthand experience. Does that give you a somewhat of an idea? And a paraprofessional and aide can and has to work under the direction of the intervention specialist. They are doing what the intervention specialist designs for them to do. And the intervention specialist is monitoring, teaching them, making sure they understand what it is that they're doing. And that could be an academic support if they've been taught how to do that. Could be behavioral support or social learning support. Can be just supervision support. So, but they have to work under the direction of the intervention specialist, and we don't put them on the IEP as a provider. They are a support for school personnel. Doesn't make any sense because they're really supporting the child. But ODE, Ohio Department of Ed, says they are listed under support for school personnel. They are helping the intervention specialist provide the services. They are supporting the intervention specialists in that role.
That is helpful. So in those kind of groups, you mentioned essentially the psych, the IS, the related services, and there's a long list of those, and the aides. So what's who reports to whom? So kind of, it's like responsible for making sure that those folks are supported, that make sure that they're executing their roles and responsibilities, etc.
Right. So the aides report to the intervention specialists. The intervention specialists report to their building principals. The related service people are under me. And then basically all of them funnel up to me. So if things are not handled at the principal level, for example, with the intervention specialist, I might get involved. If it's not handled well with me, Casey might get involved. If it's not handled with Casey then Dr. Fine would get involved. Okay, so that's the kind of supervision lines. I also have the nurses, and the English language learner department is under my supervision, and the counselors, the school counselors, and the mental health specialists, I oversee them as well. So that's why it's called student services. It's more than just special education, but it's also special education. Does that help, Andrea?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm seeing like nods all around. So
Okay.
thank you.
Good. You are welcome.
Can I ask a quick question before you move on, Barb? I actually have two. My first one is when you talked about the activity inclusion, I was just wondering if you could touch on like what that might look like eventually, or what maybe your goal for that is. I'm really interested in that. And I definitely think that's an area where we have struggled as a group, and we were working on that with Parks and Rec, but it would be great to see that kind of happen in the buildings too.
Are you referencing, Ally, the peer collaboration
Actually,
project?
the extracurricular activity, like it said that there was like maybe more inclusion possible. Kind of, I'm just wondering what that
Yes,
maybe might
yeah,
look like.
yes. Well, a couple examples that I can think of that we've been working on this fall is, for one, that section of the IEP that talks about extracurricular activities. Usually what everybody writes is, your child has the same opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities as any other child in the district. So what I'm guiding people to say is, then what support will they need to be successful in that participation? And so, for example, we have some of our aides who are supporting children in the play, in the band. So those are extracurricular activities that the children need some extra support in order to be successful. So that is one way that we're trying to do that. Go ahead, Ally. You're going to ask?
I was going to say, I think one spot that gets confusing for that is that parents, especially if they have like either an end of the year IEP or maybe a beginning of the year IEP, they're not really sure when they can access that. And I've even heard district representatives be very confused on how to address that when I've sat in on meetings. So when should parents say, okay, my kid wants to do basketball and they're going to need some support? How do we access that?
You say that whenever that comes to your mind. That, I mean, truly, because you don't know sometimes what's available until you get into that next grade level, or the flyer comes out and you're just like, wow, I didn't even know we did this here. So whenever it becomes apparent to you that this might be something your child is interested in, bring it forth to your case manager, the intervention specialist who works with your child, for that team to discuss. And it might take an IEP team meeting to discuss, and so we can figure out what that support looks like. Sometimes it could be a peer support, and we could work with the peer on how they would support. Might be an aide and how they would support. And it might not be the aide that knows your child, because sometimes we open it up to our aides for extra hours, and if they may not know your child, so we have to work with them to help them understand what it is that's needed. So that's one way. There was another example I was going to give you that is not coming to my mind. So that is something that we have to work on in the plan this year is, and I'm curious, how much are our students involved with in the extracurricular? Like, are they? And so I think that's some more information. And I guess I should have said that in my presentation, and I talked this over with Dr. Fine and with Dr. Cosgray, and this is one piece of information. The work group information is one piece of information, but then I'm also looking at two other pieces of information. One is we'll be developing this internal monitoring committee that is looking at the compliance. Have we crossed our T's, dotted our I's, followed Ohio law in our evaluation team reports and IEPs? That is one piece of a special education system. The other is the quality of our services. And much of this was reflected in the work group, but I also want to gather a little more information. And so I really think once we have those three buckets of information, we'll be able to do a more detailed plan. So that is sort of the process right now that we're going through. So
thank you. That's a lot. I mean, honestly. And then my other really quick question, in which you don't have to dive into this much, but with the CPI training, I know that like Ohio law kind of just says like the appropriate amount and doesn't give us an exact number. But when we're thinking about this, are we thinking about including people like building subs who are there all the time and start to develop these really deep relationships with students, and sometimes are interacting in moments of crisis? Like where are we stopping, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because what we're trying to look at is who is likely, and this can change year by year, right? Depending on students who might need that extra behavioral support might be in a different wing of the building next year than they were this year. And so who are those people who we can get to quickly that can be called in to support a child? So it could be a building sub teacher. It is, we have general educators, we have our intervention specialists, related service people. So each building sort of looked at their building and their layout and identified who are those folks who we call are those tier, more significant support people, the ones that we would call in, based on the building, the students that are in the building. And so each year it could be somewhat flexible in who there might need to be somebody new trained next year that was not trained this year. But we're trying to keep the people that we get trained, keep them trained.
Yes, that's great. And having having internal trainers makes that a lot easier. So that's awesome. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Allie. Any other questions for me? I'll throw my contact info back up.
Barb, if I followed your presentation, your PowerPoint, it sounds like there's sort of a one-year work plan springing from the work that Sam McMasters did last spring, and then a look to the future in the 3 to 5 year strategic plan, where we really get serious about integrating special education into the district at large. And maybe you could just address in the short period you have left, your thoughts on how parents and SEPTO and the community would be involved in that process, and what we should be looking out for.
That is a great question. I am actually, Casey, if you don't mind, I would like you to kind of talk about what the district is anticipating for how the community will be involved in that process.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for letting me join today. And I think before I talk about strategic planning, I just want to say thank you to Barb. She has jumped right in, only been here 5 weeks, and is already making a big impact and taking on the work that you all did last year and carrying that forward. So thank you to all of you who were involved in the work last year, and for joining us and providing the best opportunities for your students. But as we look to strategic planning, Dr. Fine, small committee, we interviewed several external consultants who could come in and support Bexley City Schools to make sure that it's a fully inclusive and comprehensive look at Bexley and what we need for the future. So we are making a recommendation to the board tomorrow evening, actually, to recommend the hiring of an external company. That process will include 30 on-site visits is the number that we agreed to. Earlier on, we were on a small little number, but we want to make sure that they're uncovering every rock, pulling it up, looking under, and finding everything, being very thorough. So this company has committed to 30 visits, where then there will be broad input from all members of our community. Students, we really want students' voice. We want parents' voice. We want parents from different community organizations, because the schools are a major part of the Bexley community as well. So community involvement, parent involvement, student involvement, our staff, and the leadership team will be working collaboratively with the external group to develop a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. The time frame for that is we're going to hopefully get board approval tomorrow evening, and then get started right away with a core group that will be like a steering committee to work with that group to make sure that we're getting the broad input from different groups such as yourself, the athletic boosters, band boosters, theater groups, you name it. We have broad and various groups that will be involved. The outcome is expected to then be released in probably a draft form in April or May. There's probably and highly likely going to be some funding involved with the strategic plan for either new initiatives or revision to initiatives and such. So that's that April, May-ish timeframe to make sure that we're securing and have the funding available to support the strategic plan, with the goal then to be likely approved by the board again, and then enacted for the next academic year. So next August then would be the start of implementation of the strategic plan. The one thing with this external company that we're hoping to employ is that they're not just, sometimes a company will come in, create the strategic plan and then go back home, leave. And so we're engaging in a multi-year process so that there can be ongoing evidence collection, feedback, revisions along the way. And we're hoping that that's a longer term commitment rather than a shorter term commitment, so that we can continue to provide the necessary supports to take Bexley into their next steps. I know one thing too that Dr. Fine shared with me that he had in a conversation the other day was that the company mentioned something about what's our new journey. I think it's the language, and we agreed that it's not necessarily a new journey, it's what's the next steps for Bexley, because there's so many wonderful things going on already. So it's going to be customized to Bexley City Schools. It's not going to be like you look at another community and pull their strategic plan off the shelf and, oh, this looks similar. No, we're gonna do what's needed for Bexley. So hopefully that answers or is a summary for you, but we'd be glad to entertain any questions as well if you have on the strategic planning process. So a question here, when you talk about funding, is that a tax levy? Well, I know that Bexley has delayed going back to the ballot and going back to the taxpayers for one additional year, which is wonderful. And I can't say yes or no. It all depends what is the outcome of that strategic plan and what the funding implications are. It could be. I mean, if they say, oh yeah, we need major renovations to all of our buildings, accessibility purposes, we're going to need some funds to do that. It could be that we need some minor enhancements. Then we might be able to manage that under our current general funds. There might be grants that we could seek. Thankfully, with COVID, we've been provided with many federal and state grants. And so that has enabled us to stretch our Bexley funds quite a bit. So I can't predict that at all. It all depends on the outcome. But that's
Casey,
a great question.
Yeah, thank you for the update on that. And I do want to make sure we have a few other items of business to cover with the rest of our meeting. So
Right.
I will just as a parting comment before we move on to the business meeting. I think SEPTO was really pleased for the opportunity. We asked for the opportunity to participate in Barb's interview. And I think that was a very positive experience for everybody involved. And I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say, we would hope that SEPTO will continue to be included as we go forward with the strategic planning process in a fundamental way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me this evening. I know you guys have more business. It was nice just to sit back and watch you all engage together and having Barb share the plan. So thank you. I'm going to sign off now for the evening, and we'll be in touch as we continue to work together throughout the year.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Casey.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, Barb, do you have any closing words before I stop the recording? Is there anything you'd like to add in conclusion?
No, I just thank you for your questions and for inviting me. And I hope to be very active with your future meetings in any way that you want me to be. Just really trying to learn the district, and I appreciate the opportunity.
We appreciate you coming.